What's going on, everybody? Phoenix here with our episode 2 of Sovereign Psyche Podcast. And here in the studio with us, we got MCAD, dear friend of mine, creative partner, brother in arms, poet, flowet, master of the word. Stoked to have you here. Stoked to be talking with you about a few awesome things that we're going to be getting into tonight.
Stoked to be here.
Cheers, brother.
Yeah.
I figure we could start this conversation building upon the back of episode 1, talking about, I guess before we hit go on the camera, I was talking about democratization, but you were talking about, you used a different word.
Cooperatization.
The cooperatization.
Yeah.
So building upon the momentum I initiated in episode 1, talking about the cooperatization of music and how we can bring more democracy to the process. Do you have any thoughts, comments, questions that you have on episode 1, or do you want to build upon the information laid forth of how you see the music distribution process being most optimized in 2025?
Only in that maybe rehashing for the public the definitions of democratization. I shared with you my concerns of democracies in general, which can lead to majority rule, which, let's say you have 100 people, 3 people end up participating in a voting process or a decision-making process. 2 can outweigh the 3 in a majority vote, and then those 2 can dominate the other, in this case, 98 people. And so just defining even what it means for a democratic process versus a cooperative process, so that even some of the libertarian-minded people already with a definition of what that means, don't get turned off by the fundamentals and the intention of, I think, what you're seeking for in episode 1.
Yeah. And we were talking before we hit go about exactly what that means. And I touched a little bit on this on the first episode about, in operation, what this would mean would be taking back the revenue streams and the revenue streams of distribution itself. And I thought about going into this in episode 1, but I was like, that's super dicey about how that's done. You know what I mean? In a capitalist pretense. But if we were able to do that, I think that with things like app technology, we could implement a one vote, one artist, one vote type of a system where how an app is set up to where the revenue is not under the auspice of the state nor under the auspice of the private sector, i.e. major shareholders, CEOs, etc. That if we could set that up where artists to participate in this app, in this revenue pool, in this process, they submit master rights and publishing rights to the music they record. And if they can do that, they immediately get a vote, one vote per artist who can submit convey those rights. In a process with something like app technology, you couple that process with something like app technology, I think you can really, I like to think of it as democratizing the process, because we're so far gone from that process in something like giving revenue power and decision-making over to people, like I said in the episode 1, who probably have never played a freaking string or a guitar or piano in their life, a big over-exaggeration, but you get the point. Right now, the dynamic is putting that decision-making power of what's done with the revenue from the music we make in the hands of white-collar people who don't have our interest at heart. Yeah. And then the platform becomes a weapon against us, So that's how that looks in practice. Do you agree with that? You disagree with that? How does that happen in practice to you?
I totally agree. And when I came in the other night, we talked a little bit just about semantics and words, the difference from capitalism even to greed, because there's so many industries that same exact formula takes over and corrupts and waters down the goodness of what it is. I think of being in the cannabis industry and all the big money from California that came in is the exact same thing. People that have never put their fingers in dirt, have never cultivated a plant, never cloned anything. Yeah. And then they come into this industry with simply business profit minded, which is what I took from you saying capitalism in the episode 1. And so for me, I didn't get lost in the language because the fundamentals, I'm all about principles. And so the principles are perfectly clear and I'm on board. Yeah. Even though when I came here, I wanted some clarification. Could we swap out greed with the word capitalism and still have the same impact? And we had a great discussion about that. But what it came down to is I'm about meeting of the minds. And so we're always, I feel like, reaching the same page with meeting of the minds, whether we were using the word capitalism or the word greed. Yeah. That I think they both come into taking over these industries, profit over people, and ruining a beautiful creative thing. Yeah. And so I feel like this same conversation with artists specifically, it's a no-brainer. Like, what artist would want to allow Spotify to control the distribution and the plays as good as a platform and medium as it is and pay you 0.0003 or whatever that small ratio is for your work while these people that have nothing to do with it are eating fat and living high in the hogs.
Yeah, and that's why I say the complete onus isn't just upon these business owners, because you could have an absolute sage in charge of one of these platforms. And again, I wager it's the same thing I did in episode 1. It's like, if you make that same business structure compete in these incentive structures that the system sets up, you're going to wind up, you'd be foolish to think you're going to wind up in a different place. That ethics can win out over time, when extrapolated over time, when made to compete with all these incentives. I think it's foolish to think that you can have something last for an extended period in this environment that is a truly democratic process when the revenue streams are consolidated in the hands of few people and not spread out amongst the people who are actually producing the content. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, if you consolidate that wealth, you got to be okay with marking a captain, an arbiter, an authority in the field that reigns supreme, beneath which you kind of like collect your bits. Yeah. And that's the way it's going to be, unless we can figure out a way to spread the revenue not out through a state auspice, i.e. socialist, communist type ideals, or under a private business or enterprise type setting, i.e. capitalist ideals. It's going to have to be a different meta option here, which I think have had little spurts of conveyance in our society. I think things like cooperatively operating food markets convey this in a pretty good way. Unless we move more towards that, we're going to, again, have to be okay with like crowning a king who probably doesn't play music, who collects all the revenue from our music.
Yeah. It's a fundamental in decentralization philosophy in general. Yeah. Keeping that power diffused and not consolidated.
Yeah, because those people who make all the music, they're not going to vote to give millions and millions of their revenue streaming money away to military endeavors. They're not going to give away millions and millions and millions of their revenue stream to big checks to CEOs and bonus checks. Right. You know what I mean? They're not going to, it's just not going to happen because it's a closed loop system where the people who are doing the production of the content itself are the ones benefiting from the streaming revenue. It's an unshakable system, really. But I would wager even at the local level with food markets, these these little spurts of these things that pop up, again, they're made to compete in this brutal capitalist incentive structure. And they either have to become subsidized by the government or they just die out because you can't compete with the capitalist savagery who's willing to go to the bottom to hold the bottom line of profits turned quarterly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
let's just take capitalism. Let's take a Walmart, somebody who's willing to dump trash in the streams and pollutants wherever to get cost of whatever their product is lower than not. And so they're willing to do things that we're trying not to support as people. But the end line is by them doing that, they get these competitive prices that then entice real good people to then go to Walmart, because they see this very real connection in their pocketbook and their life that they're paying less for toilet paper or whatever it is. And so who is the onus on? The capitalist that's willing to cut corners and be selfish and big ego and not righteous and not moral, or the masses that end up going to Walmart to take advantage on the daily short term. It's like short-term reward over long-term prosperity and goodness. And so I think we run into similar issues that we have to face and find accountability and incentive for with all of these models, which ultimately comes down to the everyday people's onus and responsibility. So let's say we have a co-op for the music in this app and the vote isn't on 1% or 50%. Where's the threshold if and when people stop participating in doing, whether it's their civic duty or musical artistry duty, to be a participant in that whole cooperative process?
Well, I think to answer your question, and I want to go back to the Walmart situation. There's got to be a better option available to artists, like what we're talking about, something outside the framework of the private or public sector that artists can go to and immediately start collecting revenue. To do that, you have to get listeners over to new platforms. You know what I mean? So it's a big leap. You know what I mean? It's a big leap. But again, I don't think you won't, and I don't think you can, and you won't see these conversations had in the music industry without having them across every industry in capitalism. You know what I mean? So it's a bit of a linchpin, in my opinion, to be having the conversation and to entertain the precipice or the pretense of the idea of doing something like this. But it's exciting to me, you know, to do these things.
Same.
If we could, let's go back to the Walmart thing real quick, because I think it's a fun thought experiment to go into. If we were to overlay the same optics of what we're suggesting in the music industry over top that, so not putting it under this auspice of the state, socialism, communism, and not having it in the private sector, i.e. capitalism, what we have right now, do you think that the workers of Walmart would vote to offshore their jobs to cheaper labor in China and other countries? You think they would vote to do that?
No, not on a clear, checkbox yes.
Do you think that they would vote to use chemicals that pollute the environment that their kids breathe?
Not on a simplistic, let's say they were like, you're going to make $27 an hour if we cut corners. That's
their kids that have to breathe that 14, air, right?
Yeah.
You know, that they're polluting. That's their kids that have to drink that water that they're going to be polluting, right?
Yeah.
I would wager the answer is no.
I know. But then money makes, like we're saying, not just with those apex people, but money makes lots of people funny. So if they're literally
in vacuums and in tiny little consolidated increments, like capitalism or like what we have right now, do you think those workers would choose to write giant checks to one person and have everybody else living on SNAP?
Especially when we're talking the money the Walton family and Walmart is dealing with.
Right.
Like, not even close. Yeah, no.
So while a lot of people right now are probably flipping their shit, you know what I mean, listening to something like this, that's not something that in practice that I think somebody can point to me and say over a length of time this has been in practice, when you look at communist Russia, China, all of these decision makings are under the auspice of state officials and the state itself, not the people doing the production. And in capitalism, it's under the auspice of the owner of the business at the small level and major shareholders if they've gone public. You know what I mean? In practice, what we're talking about is not either. It's a meta thing, in my opinion, that unless we go towards, we're going to continue to have these internal contradictions, the pollution of our environment, the offshoring of our jobs to other countries, the wealth gap and wealth inequality exacerbating to the point where people can't afford the very goods which the capitalists produce, you know?
Federal Reserve being a simple manifestation of that. Like, who would vote for that? Like, 100%. We can print the same money, 0 interest, but we have a private company printing it at, for sure, eternal debt. You know, like,
so it's harder and harder to have these conversations the more you go away from vital businesses, I think. Like, this conversation is way easier when you talk about water. When you talk about housing, you talk about food, you know what I mean? Pretty easy to have this conversation, especially nowadays. Harder to have this conversation when you go into the production of desks and preamps and hats and things that aren't essential for people because people want to hold close to the idea of human innovation, which I do too, which I don't think is eradicated in this dynamic. Because again, does the fact that you have to go to a job that you probably don't want to go to in order to make a paycheck to pay rent, is that an inspiring context? Like, does that support human innovation? Because I would wager it stifles human innovation because that person who is at fill in the blank job is probably crazy talented in a lot of different things, very little of which they get to apply at that job. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to spend all the time on this, but do you have any closing thoughts on this topic?
Just this specific venue you're talking about happens to be in artistry and in music, and those are the creative minds, and it's kind of unique to everything else we're talking about, from politics to even just everyday production, that I'd like to think a lot of artists are visionaries as well. And so I feel like a unique topic that might be more in the realm of people that would be more likely to be on the same page in general, because what musician wouldn't pick right now to replace Spotify with a cooperative owned one that's exactly the same everything else, except the royalties are truly getting dispersed equally for people's creative work. It's a no-brainer. And so I feel like what a good place to start the conversation in a realm that is more likely to have people have a meeting of the minds that isn't contentious and we should be able to agree upon, and let's get this thing up and running next week.
Yeah.
Because I want my royalties.
And I'll just plug this with a shameless plug of something I've been thinking about lately, which is if we're all fed up with this and when we're all fed up enough with this, general strike, baby. That's what really hits them in the heart. I love the No Kings idea. I've been on the front lines. I've held my battles in protest. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they just laugh in their ivory towers when we get out on the streets, man. Stopping the working, halting production, refusing to go to work. And I say this as a business owner, my man.
Yeah.
That's where it hits them in the heart. You know what I mean? So what does that mean for musicians? Basically, we all refuse to put our stuff on streaming platforms and move to a more cooperatization method, with it.
Yeah.
My opinion.
Yeah. And just having the conversation on the table in some platform, in some format that we can all connect to it and be talking about as technology and life evolves for eternity. It's just important to always be having these conversations and having people participate in them. So my hat's off to you for doing it right here in this format.
Yeah, dude. Crucial. Agreed. I guess on the second arc of the conversation, I want to just kind of open the venue and stage for you to talk about your like spiritual background and your spiritual walk in life. We've been creating together many years, and we've been friends many years as well. And I'm so grateful for your friendship. I look up to your work, and your work is something that shaped me. And like, it's not something that's rare that I say that like I feel like you have a level of talent that is crazy that we're not even really going to get into in this conversation because that's for another podcast. But how did you get to where you are today spiritually, and where do you draw your like your spiritual taproot and your strength in life in a world that's fucking upside down and inside out?
It's kind of the mix between nature, nurture, determinism, and free will, just even being placed into foster care as a baby, and things that seem like they're outside of your own free will and choice, that seem deterministic in nature. Like, did I choose that? Did Creator choose that? Was there a plan that even put me into the specifics that I was born into? I think is a mixture, and that just gets into the spirituality of what really is. But because I was born into that, so not having blood lineage, people that look like me passing down traditions and family stuff that maybe a biological family would, not to mention not even being in a cultural household that necessarily reflected who I am or what I was, led to a lot of free thinking, ultimately, because it wasn't just ingrained in me. 80s was a time of latchkey kids, so we were already out of the house a lot, which has pros and cons. And so I was just talking about the other day that I think with all the hardships that I had, I grew up in the Midwest, just outside of Milwaukee in the 80s, in a very gritty, rugged, I would say violent time. And so just even that time of American history was very formative into who I am in that geographic region, on some survival of the fittest and trying to find healthy ways in a scrappy, natural environment. Feels like it could have gone so many directions. I know entheogens and psilocybin and LSD and cannabis, all these things I think were modalities that, for as many negatives as there were, because there were both, I don't try to gloss over, that everything was just perfect, like how we think of cannabis or, some
Never
of the
is if you're using
psychedelics.
it right.
Yeah. And so there was a lot of misguided journeys and trial and errors that, as moving into my older years, have shaped what we're trying to do in the music, what we're trying to do in community, by not reinventing the wheel and not making the same mistakes.
I have the distinct thought often in my adult life as well of like, wow, like my first LSD experience, sorry, Mom, was at 17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's from early, but like, man, from LSD to psilocybin, ayahuasca, peyote, like in a generation that didn't have elders.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Elders or mentors.
Rudderless.
Yeah.
Do you know? You just exploring, experimenting. It's kind of wild that I wound up
Yeah.
the way I am. And I would say it's
That's what I'm
it's
saying.
blessed that you
Yeah.
wound up the way you are, bro. Like
Yeah.
pushing things forward, creating things, like challenging authority, like it requires strength of character that doesn't always come out of that context.
And I don't always feel responsible for, which I'm a spiritual person, and so I'm not just a materialist, and there's so many evidences of things in this world and in my life path that I'm thankful for, that are so far beyond my ego, who would love to take credit for so many things in this world, just can't, and so I'm thankful for even the entheogen experiences that really opened my mind and my eyes and were medicine more than party or distractions, because if I were to sum up all of it, I would say the overwhelming majority weren't that. They were partying, escapism, just pioneering, blind, like you were saying. So they weren't even set with intent or fasting and purification, anything, you know.
I mean, integrating the psychedelic experience or entheogenic experience in a ceremonial, shamanic context with proper integration is difficult.
Yeah.
You throw in going out and partying and like hedonism and just lights and sound and like hormones.
Yeah.
Good luck, brother. Good luck integrating that experience, man.
Exactly.
You know, it reminds me of an experience with one of my college dorm mates. And I was like, "You ever done psychedelics?" He's like, "Yeah, man, a few times. It's just too fucking weird, man. Like, I don't do it anymore, you know."
Yeah.
And that's valid.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, without, even with, again, like it's weird and wild and upside down and inside out and everything everywhere all at once with guidance in a shamanic context, you know?
Exactly.
Like, you can still lose your mind. I have, you know? Probably should a few times in your life. But, would you say that your entheogenic experience has influenced your speech?
Absolutely. Starting from the key experience I had that changed my life, which was at 18, and it was on psilocybin. And just in one night, from the downloads to the insights to the knowledge and the wisdom, immediately I lacked a toolbox, especially a vocabulary. So I was up north Wisconsin when I came back down to the Milwaukee area. I literally didn't know how to speak to the people that I grew up with and a lot of the males that I grew up with. And I had a totally different understanding within 16 hours and the inability to communicate that to people that I was surrounded with. And it led to me selling everything that I had and relocating to Colorado.
And you were how old here?
I was 18.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
And what was your first experience? Entheogenic?
No.
No, when was your first?
14, maybe 13. It was early. Everything.
Got some years on me.
Everything Midwest was early. And like, yeah.
Latchkey. Legit.
And just like the epitome of no guidance and no elders and no leaders and no philosophy and no culture. You know, it was lots of people from different walks of life making it up as we were going in a very chaotic way. And so,
as important and imperative as I feel like the entheogenic is to the human experience, it's scary to think of kids coming up these days without that guidance. You know, it makes me want to look back down to the younger generation and
just
be whatever
down.
anchor you know, that I can.
We're dealing it right now with my friend's son and experimentation, and he's got some guidance. He has me, and he's got his pops and his mom who are super informed, and it's still just very different times, and the nature of youth to not respect and, you know, totally trust in the elders that they do have even right now, even when they are rooted in pretty good resources for that. And so I think it's something we're always going to have to battle, but certainly with critical mass or far more of that in our culture, it could be way less than it is. And it is a cultural symptom that we have that I think we're battling with our own children and the communities. And now in times of social media, much less festival culture and being up at a Rise and there's 14,000 people at this festival and how many thousands are out there smoking DMT for tipper, and no disrespect to anybody, but I've had time sitting there reflecting on that exact sentiment of this is wild.
What are we doing here?
Yeah.
What's the point? What's the motive?
Yeah, there's freedom and there's
the
love,
unifying ethic.
And yet this isn't it. What I was experiencing one night, you know, I was like, this.
Not to be a Debbie Downer too much about it, but like, man, having participated so deeply and had my hands so deeply up in festival culture for so many years, it feels a bit like, at best, co-opted experiment, at worst, totally failed experiment. The transformational festival scene.
Yeah.
it's like you see it these days and it just feels plastic. It feels like a hollow shell of what it's of
Yeah.
its former self, you know.
And not to return to the first conversation, but what a perfect microcosm of that with cooperative and where the responsibility falls. And there are some people leading the vibe and
Yeah.
building the venues and all this stuff. And
Yeah.
it's not always nefarious how it then comes to be chaotic and not the ideal,
Yeah.
you know?
That goes back to what we were talking about earlier, man. It always does, because can you really expect anything more in a late stage capitalist system? Can you really expect any of these festivals to operate in the ways that we diligently see, that at least I saw that this experiment was leading towards, like actual sustainable lifestyle that we can, like, I felt like we were building a lifeboat
Mm-hmm.
to what's coming.
Yeah.
Essentially, and it feels like now that lifeboat just got integrated into what's happening.
Yeah.
You know, and what's coming, the shitstorm that our modern day society is.
Mm-hmm. I just feel moved to say it in that I think there's a fall of spirit and there's a fall of mankind, and it's reflected in my personal journey and these greater modalities. When you're asking about my spiritual journey, even to hear that I see so much, whether it's I always get nervous referencing occult stuff because I'm anti a lot of occult stuff. So, like the Baphomet, for example, the as above, so below, as within, so without, these principles that are real and in nature that I think have been taken by spiritual deviants. Because as you reference capitalism, I reference a spirit and a group and type of person that's out there that is intentionally wicked and deviant and dominating, that is willing to, in this minority that they are, I think most people are good. And but when you have these people, you know what the Machiavelli principle is?
I've heard of it. Sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's like Machiavelli is kind of the opposite of some of the New Age stuff. New Age is like goodness is 10 times more powerful than negativity. Machiavelli is like, no, the places that are willing to dump into the rivers, the people that are willing to cheat, rob, and steal, and use the 40 laws of power and all these things to get a step up, have more power, and they do more than those that have good morals. And so negativity starts to outweigh positivity.
Like wins out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you're willing to cheat and lie, that it'll give you an advantage. And that's where these ideas of spirit and karma and truth and everything that we talk about get kind of esoteric and etheric and hard to make tangible in some of these modalities that I do think they're still impacting. And I just say that because it is part of my spiritual journey. Is I feel I've had to battle those demons in me spiritually of why to do the right thing, why to be different than how I grew up, or not dominate somebody, or to care about something, to be charitable without return and incentive is something that came. I had it in me, but post 18 mushroom experience became very clear. Now it's impossible for me to deny or try to go against that, but I know
that being a mystical component to reality,
mystical and moral, objective goodness, to do the right thing,
do good, yeah. Mm-hmm. And you feel that in your heart of what is good and what
I feel
is
that
not.
in my heart and in my eyes, in my gut, in the three minds, in everything I experience. And so we're not in agreement as a community about truth, and part of truth is objective good. If there is, we have atheists, agnostics, Hindus, Gnostics, all these different sects of people that are pulling from different histories and philosophies and spiritualities, which I feel blessed in that my upbringing didn't root me in one. And so I kind of had to find mine on my own through a lot of trial and error. But I also see a guiding force that was with me all the time that led me to good and to truth and to what I now embody as my spirituality that I don't see as obvious for everybody out there, especially when we're getting to the mainstream, media, politics, social media, all these things that seem like capitalism alone. I've told you the other day I'm for free market interactions with people, and that I was interjecting the word greed in place of capitalism, in that whatever we're doing in life, if there's a spirit of greed, will create different things than if there's a spirit of unity, oneness, obligation, duty, loyalty, charity, all these things that in these vast philosophies, it's not obvious why charity should be. What good is in, I set up this show. Why don't I get paid $400 to your $50?
Yeah.
That's where it starts to get messy, and people I know get hurt and confused, and relationships break, and everything we're trying to minimize with a prosperity mindset in a new app that would give everybody prosperity. Because when all the people are leaving bellies full, satiated, nobody's bickering about some of the little differences in abundance.
It changes the pretext from which everybody acts.
Yeah.
I feel like there's one thing that needs to be true in order for the Machiavellian principles to be accurate, and it is that the most dominant will win so long as people are unaware of their power, are unaware of their real power. Because if they're aware of their real power, they won't give over their power to the most dominant one. They'll just refuse to participate. And that one minority, but then for that, you have to believe in the goodness of people. If the goodness of people's real and they know their power, we're impenetrable, so far as how we want to dictate ourselves on this whirling rock in space. You know what I mean?
And I'll go as far to say not just in us, but in the Great Spirit, in the Most High, because I believe the design for the whole thing isn't Machiavellian. And while there's been a time in society where that has reigned more supreme and seemed more powerful, it isn't in the longevity and the bedrock of what the true truth is. And so that's where optimism comes from. If you don't have that, it can get depressing, all of this stuff. Maybe it will never return to a good public co-op, where my faith in Yahuwah and the Most High is that all the designs to everything that's been intelligently designed is for good. And so even Maya and the great illusion of the deceiver and the adversary isn't going to win ultimately. And I take faith in that, which lets me be more calm when I'm sitting behind an idiot in traffic and I want to get in my ego in my head and be like, whatever it is, you know what I mean? That makes you be selfish and in the lower chakras in survival mode and doubting and thinking of self first, or maybe family first, my family over yours. We talked about the water hole the other day. And why not dominate if there's a finite resource? It gets tricky and people get possessive, and scarcity makes people act funny. And when there's abundance, which the world is, the apple trees are abundant. I was going to say
perceived scarcity
exactly.
makes people crazy.
That's why I'm saying these people, the Spotify CEOs, the ones you refer to as the capitalists, are alchemists that are out there constantly just trying to program and make everybody believe the illusion, believe scarcity.
Because you gotta go out of your way in this world, a world of abundance. You gotta go out of your way to create the illusion of scarcity. And there's a harmonic resonance. I feel like, I believe that there's a morphic resonance to somebody living their life committed to the values of goodness, equality, faith, justice, freedom, all those things. Somebody who's living by those ideals, committed to them, not just like a secondary, tertiary thing in their life, somebody who that is like their edifices by which they live their life. There's a resonance to somebody like that, and I feel like you have that, bro.
I think you got that.
Hopefully, the way that we live, hopefully there's something like that going on. But I just so appreciate you, brother, and
Same.
the work that you do in this world is just remarkable. If you want to check out any of his stuff, you can go check out MCAD, Freedom Movement,
Inner Army.
We got
Check
good
out
stuff.
The collabos.
We got some music coming out here in the next few months.
Yeah,
we got new over the edge vibes.
Indigo vibes.
Yeah.
So much. Yeah.
You, me, and Elias, we got some stuff coming out, and we might even have some skanky reggae coming out too.
Yeah. And we might have some dope podcast episodes that are bringing the truth to the people. Oh, wait, we're on it right now.
That might be the thing.
Yeah.
Nice, dude.
Yeah.
Well, much love to you, brother.
Thanks.
And super appreciate y'all joining us on the podcast. This has been the Sovereign Psyche Podcast, breaking the mold. My name's Phoenix.
My name's AD.
You guys have a good day.
Peace.